Hey, it's Kelly O'Connell, author and attorney, and I have taken about 2 weeks off to have a YouTube timeout. And so maybe it was 10 days. I'd have to go back and check, but it's been a little while. Glad to be back. And just like you, I've been watching the news and checking things out, and I came across something that I found to be really absurd and nonsensical, and I wanted to go after it here. And hope you're doing well. And that, by the way, that volcano on in the La Palma Island is just continues to grow and shoot out more and more lava. And now it's shooting out these what look like cannonballs, and they are balls of, as you can imagine, lava that come down, and a lot of times they hit, and because they're up on this hill, they hit and roll down the mountain. It's really amazing. All right. Merrick Garland's reign of incompetence meant as a bouquet of weeds delivered to America's funeral. Now, I put a little warning here. The following analysis is unnerving, to say the least. Now, if you think about it, this guy had this couple of days in front of Congress, and especially in front of Senator Cruz, but also Josh Hawley. He got torn to shreds. And then another another senator had said to him that he was incompetent and needed to resign. And I think that might have been Senator Cotton, but he was just torn to shreds. So I wanted to follow up on this and give this my interpretation, my understanding of what is going on. And so for every one of Biden's poorly made decisions and subsequent disasters, there is a explanation that makes more sense than anything that I have seen. And therein is indeed a reason behind the madness, if you will. All right. Now, if you look in the history of leftism, which starts around the time immediately after the French Revolution, you have the history of leftism, socialism, communism, progressivism, liberalism, however you want to describe it. You've got a problem, and the main problem is, to the average person, communism or socialism, Marxism, it doesn't make sense, because Marxism proposes that the average person is not going to mind working while other people are not working, and will not mind paying for them. More ideas include the notion that people will gladly give up everything they own to help others. And finally, that people will finally buy into the idea that property itself is getting in the way of having a good life. Now, the average person wants to have a house and a job and a car, a bank account, and wants to be able to buy the stuff that he or she wants or needs. And so this goes totally against human nature, because at some level I think people understand that goes or gets in the way of survival. So leftists, because of all of this history, have come to the conclusion that they will never be that popular enough to win elections broadly if they were to run on what they believe. So there's a couple of things they do, and one of which you've noticed is to lie about their policies. As you saw with Barack Obama, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your health care plan, and if Syria tries to cross this line, it's a red line and we're going to go after him. And then he comes up with leading from behind and all this. And Barack was reelected after he killed Osama bin Laden. I think people really believed he was fighting hard in the war against terror, and really, in my opinion, from just watching him, Barack Obama was a dilettante. He had certain things that he did little memes or kind of trademarks, and one of which is running up and down the airplane steps, kind of jaunty, if you know what I mean. Played a lot of basketball, was kind of a person who got a lot out of being cool in his life, and he decided not to give it up when he came into office, which to me was foolish because his policy was weak, and so it was an illusion that he was a strong leader. And now he's out there and he's trying to help in Virginia, he's helping in other places, trying to sell Marxism. And the hallmark of Marxism is to build more state power. And so that's why you've got this guy who seems like an idiot. I have to assume that Merrick Garland is not an idiot because he went to the most strenuous schools in America. Harvard, he went there for his undergrad, which was in sociology? I can't remember now. But he then was able to get into law school, and then when he came out, he became a person that Barack Obama really enjoyed and tried to put on the Supreme Court. Now, update that, 10 years or whatever, however long it's been since Barack was in power at the end of his, so what is it, like 6 months before the end of his term, he tries to get this guy in there and he doesn't get in, and it's a hassle for the left and they're outraged. That was 4 years of Trump with another half year thrown in, and now we've got a half. So it's really only been like 5 years. But anyway, Merrick Garland was presented, he's a judge, or was a judge, as being this great mind, a great legal mind. And in fact, he's terrible, as everybody now realizes. So the left can't get in the people, in the ideas, the policies that they wanted in the past anyway. They didn't have their support. So at this point, you've got Joe Biden, who's very weak, and he always talks about these people. I'll get in trouble if I say this or that, and is never able to really talk about stuff without a teleprompter in front of him, which was also something that Barack suffered from. Not a good extemporaneous speaker, which is one of the hallmarks of an original mind, obviously, is you can think on your feet, you can make up ideas and then present yourself and your plans, your hopes, your stories, but your policies off the cuff, because you understand them well enough to be able to talk off of a teleprompter, away from a teleprompter. So in the history of Marxism, they've never been able to get elected to do what they wanted to do, and so there always has to be this bait and switch. Always. And then there has to be some level of revolution, and that's what Karl Marx believed in. And when Karl Marx died, his writing partner, who was really the guy that paid for all of his stuff, Engels, said, the most important thing to Marx was revolution. And I read that and I thought, well, why would that be? And then I realized nothing that Marx wants to do is really seen as in the average person's best interest. And so you've got to have a revolution that rolls everything over, and then you can force people into these new things. And so what they're doing now is they have the tiniest majority. They don't even have a majority in the Senate. They have Kamala Harris, 50-50 with Kamala Harris to break the tie, so they don't have really an argument to say, the Senate is obviously what the Senate has to do what the Democrats want. And the same thing with the House of Representatives. I think they've only got, at the most 6, but maybe it's 4 or 5 in addition. And I'm astounded that the Republicans haven't been able to sell switching parties to these people so that people that were more moderate, so that they could get supported by the Republicans, especially in areas like Kristen Sinema, who's in a Republican state, and she can become a Republican senator and then really probably stay in there for the rest of her life if she wanted to. But so the idea of total government domination of all life, which is it's horrible to hear about that was rejected by the Founding Fathers, by General George Washington and all the colonists. We risked everything to push back against this expropriation of taxes. But it was really, we were fighting off control from a far distant power who didn't have our best interest in mind. And so, to this day, there's never been support for a tyranny in America. But we're doing tyrannical things. So, like leaving a bunch of people behind and kind of deciding off the cuff, we're going to leave a foreign country and leave thousands of our people there who had always counted on being able to use American resources to get home before the military did. So to win permanent power, they've got to launch a strategic coup and engage in what they believe is a sacred act of leadership, which is the revolution that I had already mentioned. So the Marxists, and I'm sure that you notice this, because it's probably the most. There's a couple of things that exemplify Marxism. One of which is treating taxes as if they're sacred and wanting to always increase taxes because they always want more money to pay for stuff or pay for their ideas, but they really want to control everything through this. That's one. Another one is the more socialist, the more leftist the policies are, the more they fail. A third one is incompetent leadership, which you always see together with Marxism, because success as a leader, good public policies, that's not a strong interest of theirs. What they're looking for is to be able to stay in control. And then the last thing is really to build a tyranny that you claim will become a utopia. That's it. There's really not a lot. So and the last thing that I would say is this constant sense of laughing at other people, of making sport or scoffing at other people because the other people don't accept Marxism, therefore they're not as smart, and therefore you have to laugh at them and pity them. So you've got this chess game being played out currently right now of Marx playing chess versus, in their minds, Adam Smith with his checkers. And, that's not really accurate. The more sophisticated, the smarter you are, the better educated and prepared and experienced you are, the better leadership you should have. And so my argument is conservatives and libertarians and even moderates are smarter than far left people, because we have ideas that when they're developed and our plans are put together and they're applied to the society, to the economy, to the government, then they're successful. And of course, success is a higher level of effort and insight because anybody can come along and destroy. It's so easy. And that's what they're doing right now. Think about all the things that have been destroyed since Biden got into office. So where does all this come from? Well, this gamesmanship comes from this humanistic view of life, non-religious, anti-religious, and it's partly Gnostic, and the Gnostics were an ancient group who believed and taught. They were within Christian circles, just like today. The elites are infiltrating everything. They want to infiltrate every single bureaucracy and take it over, every government, every position, to force reality on people. And so in the ancient world, they infiltrated Christianity and taught that salvation does not come through faith or knowledge of God. Salvation comes through being educated and enlightened through religious and mostly humanistic ideas. And so as these groups are being developed, everybody takes a role. They have a role. Now, Merrick Garland was presented as a fitting member of the Supreme Court. He would have been proposed as near a genius, a savant, a magi. And so what they've had him now is to switch roles. Now he's a bumpkin. He's a buffoon. He's a bimbo. He volunteered to play the part of the doddering old man who can't make good decisions because he's incompetent. He's not credible. He has a self-indulgent indolence that he resides in, a laziness. And so instead of researching current trends with his department that has over 100,000 people in it, and the most exhaustive and powerful Justice Department in the world, which includes the FBI, he gets most of his news, according to him, his own testimony, from TV. And so tragic or dangerous things are developing in the country, and he's anecdotally finding out about them in mainstream media. So and one of the interesting ideas here is that he could get enough information out of the media to make a good decision, which is, of course, nonsense, because the media doesn't present itself as being either scientific or exhaustive. They're doing what's current all the time, you know. So he kind of reminds me of The Human Centipede, this terrible movie that is about these people who wreck their car or run out of gas, they get a flat tire or whatever, near this man's place, and they go over to the door and to knock, and he lets them in, and he's a German scientist, and it turns out he's been working on this human centipede idea for a long time, and he gives them knockout drugs, you know, kind of a thing, and they wake up and they've been modified and attached to each other. So there's a person in the front, a person in the middle, and the person in the back. It's disgusting, but they're attached by except for the guy in the front, the girl in the front, they're attached to each other's, the mouth to the anus, they're sewn together so that you would put food in the first person and it would travel all the way to the back person. And I mean, just diabolical, you know. So he is crazy. I mean, he put out this order that the FBI needs to track and study parents who disagree with school boards. And it came out in the testimony that he never even bothered to fact check on it. He never bothered to do it. It was really, I mean, truly insane to hear this and realize this guy's got so much power. I want to put a clip in here. Okay, so I'm going to just do this clip of Ted Cruz and then a clip of Josh Hawley going after this guy. But it's really astounding. And I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to finish, and then I'll have one last clip where Cruz asks him if he will discuss whether the fact that his son-in-law runs a company that teaches critical race theory, which most people are against in America, whether he talked to the ethics people at the Department of Justice about whether his family would be benefited by that, and he refused to discuss it. So check out these two amazing clips. And this is a little longer. I'm going to get rid of weird news for just this one show, and you're going to be amazed by this. Thank God for Senator Cruz, who was an assistant as a law student to the chief judge, or after he graduated, the chief judge of the United States Supreme Court, and the same for Hawley. Absolutely stellar work by these two. And Garland is completely out of his depth with these two.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For 8 years under Barack Obama, the Department of Justice was politicized and weaponized. When you came before this committee in your confirmation hearing, you promised things would be different. I asked you specifically, quote, will you commit to this committee that under your leadership, the Department of Justice will not target the political opponents of this administration? Here was your answer, quote, absolutely. It's totally inappropriate for the department to target any individual because of their politics or their position in a campaign. That was your promise just a few months ago. I'm sorry to say you have broken that promise. There is a difference between law and politics. And General Garland, you know the difference between law and politics. Law is based on facts. It is impartial. It is not used as a tool of political retribution. This memo was not law. This memo was politics. On Wednesday, September 29th, the National School Board Association wrote a letter to the president asking the president to use the Department of Justice to target parents that were upset at critical race theory, that were upset at mask mandates in schools, to target them as domestic terrorists. On the face of the letter was in repeated consultation with the White House, in explicit political consultation with the White House. That was on Wednesday, September 29th. 5 days later, on Monday, so right after the weekend, boom, you pop out a memo, giving them exactly what they want. Now, by the way, I understand that. In politics, that happens all the time. An important special interest wants something. Sir, yes, sir. We're going to listen to him. Let me ask you something, General Garland. In the letter, which you told the House of Representatives was the basis for this abusive memo targeting parents, how many incidents are cited in that memo?
I have to look back through the memo. I can't count it.
You don't know. How many of them were violent?
Again, the general report...
How many of them were violent? Do you know?
I don't know.
You don't know. And there's a reason you don't know. Because you didn't care, and nobody in your office cared to find out. I did a quick count just sitting here. During this hearing, I counted 20 incidents cited. Of the 20, 15 on their face are nonviolent. They involve things like insults. They involve a Nazi salute. That's one of the examples. My God, a parent did a Nazi salute at a school board because he thought the policies were oppressive. General Garland is doing a Nazi salute at an elected official. Is that protected by the First Amendment?
Yes, it is.
Okay. 15 of the 20 on the face of it are not violent. They're not threats of violence. They're parents who are unhappy. Yet, miraculously, when you write a memo, the opening line of your memo, in recent months, there has been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence. You know what? You didn't look, and nobody on your staff looked. Did you even look up the 20 instances?
As I testified, the decision to make send a memo is for an assessment.
Did you look up the 20 instances?
I did not read.
Did anyone on your staff look them up?
I don't know the answer, but it's not
but of course
memo.
You don't. In general, there's a reason. Look, you started your career as a law clerk to Justice Brennan. You've had many law clerks during the year, during your time as a judge. I was a clerk to Chief Justice Rehnquist. I'll tell you what, if I drafted an opinion for the Chief Justice and walked in and it said, there's a disturbing pattern of violence. Well, Ted, how do you know that? Well, I got an amicus brief here who claims it. You would fire a law clerk who did that. You're the Attorney General of the United States. This was not a tweet you sent. This is a memo to the Federal Bureau of Investigations saying, go investigate parents as domestic terrorists.
That is not what the memo says at all. It does not.
Is it what the letter says?
That is not what.
Is it what the letter says?
I don't care what the letter says.
You don't care. You said it was the basis of your memo. You testified under oath before the House of Representatives. The letter was the basis of your memo. Now you don't care about the letter?
The letter and public reports of violence and threats of violence. My memo says nothing about domestic terrorism, says nothing about parents committing any such things. My memo is an attempt to get an assessment of whether there is a problem out there that the federal government needs to resolve.
The letter on its face says the actions of the parents could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism.
And that is wrong.
And asks the president to use the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism directed at parents. This was the basis of your memo.
My memo.
The Department of Justice, when you're directing the FBI to engage in law enforcement, you're not behaving as a political operative because a political ally of the president says, hey, go attack these parents because we don't like what they're saying. Department of Justice, you did no independent research on what was happening, did you?
The memo has nothing to do with partisan.
Did you do independent research?
The memo has.
Did you do independent research?
The memo has nothing to do.
Okay, you're
with
not answering that
politics.
question. You've testified you know nothing about the violent sexual assault that happened in Loudoun County, even though it's one of the bases in this letter.
I read about it since then.
Okay. You told the House last week you knew nothing about it.
Not know at the time, no.
Okay. This week, the court concluded that a 14-year-old girl was violently raped by a boy wearing a skirt in the girls' restroom. The school district covered it up, released the boy, sent him to another school where he violently raped another girl. The father, who Mr. Hawley just showed you, was the father of the first girl. He was understandably... Do you understand why a parent would be upset when your daughter is raped at school, the school board covers it up, and then lies to you and claims there have been no assaults, we have no instances of assaults in our bathroom, and that was a flat-out lie, as the court concluded this week. Do you understand why the parent would be upset?
Absolutely, and any expressions of upset are completely protected by the First Amendment.
Except you just called him a domestic terrorist.
I never called him that. That's not correct.
This letter calls him a domestic terrorist. You based a direction to the FBI, an official direction from the Attorney General, on this letter, and I'll tell you what, the NSBA is so embarrassed of this letter, they've apologized for it and retracted it, but you don't apparently have the same willingness to apologize and retract what you did. Let me ask you.
Thanks, Senator Ossoff. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Garland, on October 4th, you issued an unprecedented memo that involves the Department of Justice and the FBI and local school districts, local school boards, nothing like it in our country's history. It was based, you've testified, on this letter from the National School Board Association that we now know the White House was involved in writing. They've retracted the letter. They've apologized for the letter. They say they regret the letter, but you won't retract the memo and said earlier that you have no regrets. And you've defended yourself repeatedly today before this committee by saying, well, you're focused on violence. But now, of course, we've seen the memo from your own Justice Department advising state and local and other prosecutors about all of the different federal causes of action that they can bring against parents that are not about violence, they're about harassment and intimidation. I'm looking here at this memo. It identifies no fewer than 13 possible federal crimes involving harassment and intimidation, including making annoying phone calls. Do you think a parent who makes a phone call to a school board member that she has elected, that school board member deems annoying, should be prosecuted, General Garland?
No, I don't. And the Supreme Court has made quite clear that the word intimidation with respect to the constitutional protection is one that directs a threat to a person with the intent of placing the victim in fear of bodily harm or death. Prosecutors who investigate these cases know the Supreme Courts. This is a very famous leading case.
Prosecutors do, but parents don't, General Garland. Do you think that a parent who looks at the 13 different federal crimes that your Justice Department has identified they might be subject to and prosecuted for, like making annoying phone calls, do you think that they're going to feel that they're welcome to speak up at a school board meeting? How about this one? They could be prosecuted for using the internet, I guess that would be Facebook, in a way that might cause emotional distress to a victim. Is that a crime of violence?
Senator, I haven't seen the memo that you're
Why
talking
haven't
about,
you?
and I don't. Even from the description, it doesn't sound like it was addressed to parents. But if you
No, it wasn't addressed to parents. It was addressed to prosecutors. That's the problem. Why haven't you seen the memo?
I don't know why I haven't. I don't look at every. I do not get every memo that every U.S. attorney sends out. But if you're
wait a minute. Don't. I just want to be sure I understand this. This is a memorandum that collects 13 different federal crimes parents could be charged with. It has United States Department of Justice on the top of it, and you're telling me you haven't seen it?
Who's the memo from, Senator?
The United States Department of Justice, United States Attorney for the District of Montana.
I have not seen a memo from the District of Montana.
Not high enough priority for you?
It's not. That's not the question. I don't.
It is the question. Answer my question. Is it not a high enough priority for you when you're threatening parents with 13 different federal crimes? These aren't crimes of violence. You've testified today you're focused on violence. That's not what your U.S. attorneys, they work for you. That's not what they're saying. You haven't seen it because it's not a high enough priority, or what?
Question of priority. No one has sent me that memo, so I haven't seen it.
What do you mean no one has sent you the memo? You run the United States Department of Justice, do you not?
There are 115,000 employees of the Department of Justice.
Indeed, and you are in charge of every one of them. And this was a sufficiently important case that you issued a memo. You, over your signature, issued a memo involving the FBI and the Department of Justice in local school boards, local school districts. Your U.S. attorneys are now threatening prosecution with 13 different crimes, but it's not a high enough priority for you. It got lost in the mix.
I'll send again. I've never seen that memo.
That's what concerns me, General Garland.
Well, it wasn't sent to me. I hope you will assure your constituents that what we are concerned about here is violence and threats of violence.
That only leads me to conclude, General Garland, all I can conclude from this is either that you're not in control of your own department, or that, more likely, what I think to be the case, is that you knew full well that this is exactly the kind of thing that would happen. When you issued your memo, when you involved the Department of Justice and all of its resources, and the FBI and all of its resources, in local school boards and local school districts, you knew that federal prosecutors would start collecting crimes that they could use against parents. You knew they would advise state and local officials that these are all of the ways parents might be prosecuted. You knew that that was the likely outcome, and that's exactly what's happened. And we're talking about parents like Scott Smith, who's behind me over my shoulder. This is a father from Loudoun County, Virginia. Here he is at a school board meeting. He was forcibly restrained. He was assaulted. He was arrested. Why? Because he went to an elected school board meeting. He's a voter, by the way. He went to an elected school board meeting to raise the fact that his daughter was assaulted, sexually assaulted, in a girl's restroom by a boy. This is what happened to him. Now, you testified last week before the House that you didn't know anything about this case. I find that extraordinary because the letter that you put so much weight on, the letter that's now been retracted, it cites this case. It cites Mr. Scott's case directly. There's a news article cited in the letter. It's discussed in the letter, but you testified you just couldn't remember it. Maybe this will refresh your memory. Do you think people like Scott Smith, do you think parents who show up to complain about their children being assaulted ought to be treated like this man right here?
Parents who show up to complain about school boards are protected by the First Amendment.
Do you think that they ought to be prosecuted in the different ways that your U.S. attorneys are identifying?
If what they're doing is complaining about what the school board is doing, policies, curriculum, anything else that they want to, as long as they're not committing threats of violence, then they should not be prosecuted, and they can't be.
Let me ask you about this. Several of my Democrat colleagues have today, just today in this hearing, multiple times have compared parents who show up at school board meetings, like Mr. Smith here, have compared them to criminal rioters. You think that's right? You think that a parent who shows up at a school board meeting, who has a complaint, who wants to voice that complaint, and maybe she doesn't use exactly the right grammar, you think they're akin to criminal rioters? Do you agree with that?
I do not, and I do not remember any senator here making that comparison.
Oh, really? These people are just like the folks who came here on January 6th and in the riot at the Capitol?
I don't think they were referring to the picture that you're showing there.
Well, I certainly would hope not, but they were referring to parents who go to school board meetings. Mr. Smith is a parent who went to a school board meeting. I'll leave it at this, General Garland. You have weaponized the FBI and the Department of Justice. Your U.S. attorneys are now collecting and cataloging all the ways that they might prosecute parents like Mr. Smith because they want to be involved in their children's education and they want to have a say in their elected officials. It's wrong. It is unprecedented, to my knowledge, in the history of this country, and I call on you to resign. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So you've heard all that, and now let's just finish this idea that I had. So anyway, you've got what's going on in America, very similar to Kafka's trial. The trial. Kafka was a guy. He was a German writer in the early part of last century, and he was an attorney, and he wrote, and his themes tended to include surrealism or really absurdity. And you've got this guy in this, and he's at I was going to say he's home, but he's at home in his apartment, and he gets basically a knock on the door. And it's a couple of guys who let him know that he's charged with a crime. But from the beginning to the end of the trial, he's never told what crime he is charged with, number one. And number two, there is just so much intrigue going on. There's so many rumors, and people are trying to help him, and or they seem to be. And he's never sure if the people trying to help him are trying to help him or trying to harm him. Hires an attorney who's just dreadful, and he keeps going to court. It's not very well organized. The courtroom is full of people who worked for the government, and it kind of reminded me of what's going on now. There's a secret collusion now for power, and it's out in the open, just like in the trial when Kafka's character, I think his name's Franz, they come to his apartment and they let him know that he's charged, but you never figure out what they claim that he did. But in our case, countless government stooges collude against the defendants as confusion dominates and communication ceases while total incompetence reigns. Due process becomes a fiction. The accused in this particular instance is America itself. We the people, in a land of democracy and republicanism that's supposed to focus on the vast number of citizens, of voting citizens, well, we're hated by the plebs. We are the hated plebs. The plebs were, plebs urbana were the people who lived in ancient Rome, who were the majority of the population and really had no representation. And so they were kind of looked down upon. We are the great unwashed, the morons of capitalism, despised by the elites who must be scrubbed from society. We have to be removed so the planet may survive while utopia is finally instituted. And as you know, in a lot of these cases where they talk about the earth, at some point they show all their cards and they reveal that they see us as viruses, as germs, as parasites that are destroying the earth, and we should be wiped out so all the animals could enjoy it, you know. Now, with all the stuff going on, all the stuff that we've been through, Antifa, BLM, all the year of rioting, and this surge over the border, which is going to bring in about 3 million people this year. There's supposed to be 400,000 coming in this month. Brand new people, we don't know anything about them. There's too many people crossing the border. And we've got a bunch of people coming back from Afghanistan, and we now know, we don't know who they are, but we know that we've imported a bunch of people that were not background checked, and some of them have to be terrorists who hate our guts. So when Cruz and Hawley are confronting Garland, the idea that the most important thing that they work on isn't all of these other issues, but parents, is so perverted. And Garland even said that they were going to make these rules for the FBI and then later they'll fact check them. And Garland comes across as just like in a movie, you just go up and pick somebody off the street, transport them to the government, install him in high office, and just let him run off of his knowledge and his experience. And as you see there, in topic after topic, Garland doesn't know the facts. Now, he lied about one thing, and that should let you know that he's pretending to be this stupid moron who just does stuff off of instincts. He said that he didn't know anything about this girl that was raped, in which the kid came into the bathroom in a dress, like we're supposed to allow, and raped a girl, and then instead, because they didn't want to blow the cover of all these trannies, they didn't want them to be disrespected, and so they sent this kid to another school, and he raped another girl there. So that's what they were mad about, and Garland is trying to sick the FBI on these parents, and one of the parents that was so upset was this father of this girl who he had been lied to, and they refused to tell him that his daughter had been raped. I mean, how do you cover something like that up? It was priceless when he was grilled in these clips that I put in here. He was blubbering when he was asked about whether he was biased, whether his family was making money off of critical race theory. They clearly are. He's fighting to teach it across the United States. These people are trying to destroy something very special and very essential in our society. And the reason is, and I beg you to start doing research on what Marxism teaches. They're doing it so they can replace us with a Marxist society, even though Marxism has never worked anywhere. So when these people talk down to you, just think about that. Now, in Merrick Garland's family, he helped his daughter, I guess, or his daughter naturally chose some guy that was teaching critical race theory or putting out products for that. And they're teaching these generations to be more and more woke. Merrick Garland is an outrageous liar, or he's a complete moron. And you heard Hawley say just resign. But it reminded me of when I was reading about Pete Buttigieg and his staying home for months, even though he's the head of the Department of Transportation, and to be with his child that some other woman had, of course, because he and his husband can't have children. And the father, I was so shocked to realize that the father translated the Italian notebooks, these prison notebooks of Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, who's probably the most important Marxist authority today. So that's the kind of house he was raised in, a rebel house, and so Pete becomes a rebel. Now, in conclusion, overall, America is in desperate straits, and we must prepare for even worse depredations and insane policies than we've seen in these last 9 months. Let's consider ourselves lucky to live at a crucial time, and I challenge you on this, my friends, to resist true enemies threatening human society and liberty. And remember when Churchill said, "Never give in." In his Never Give In speech, "Do not let us speak of darker days, let us speak rather of sterner days." These are not dark days, they are great days, the greatest days our country has ever lived, and we must all thank God that we have been allowed, each of us according to our stations, to play a part in making these days memorable in the history of our race. So we've got to fight back against these people, but we got to do it the way that Josh Hall and Ted Cruz did. We got to beat them on their merits. We have to fight back. And we gotta save our country. We gotta do it for ourselves, for our children, for our families, for all of the innocent people that need leadership in this country and protection. We have to do it for God. This is still the brightest light for the Christian view of life, of government, of society. And we're never, ever going to be able to make a better country than this, I don't think, because we were really started as a Christian experiment when those people floated into Massachusetts and got out. They were trying an experiment of life without government domination in their religion or in their lives. So thank you for tuning in, and I'm going to finish up with this last clip here. I'm trying to keep this from being too long. It's a very long, but I hope it's enjoyable and just shows the evil that's going on. And I hope that you will all pray that we have good leadership, or that somebody who's talented and is virtuous comes in to lead this country after Joe Biden, because he's an absolute wreck. Thanks, Kelly O'Connell. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Ciao.
Your son-in-law makes a very substantial sum of money from a company involved in the teaching of critical race theory. Did you seek and receive a decision from an ethics advisor at the Department of Justice before you carried out an action that would have a predictable financial benefit to your son-in-law?
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of
I just
violence.
asked a question. Did you seek an
It has
ethics
no predictable
Did you
effect
seek
on-
an ethics opinion?
It has no
Did you seek an ethics opinion? Judge, you know how to ask questions and answer them. Did you seek an ethics opinion?
You asked me whether I sought an ethics opinion about something that would have a predictable effect on something. This has no predictable effect in the way that you're talking about.
So if critical race theory is taught in more schools, does your son-in-law make more
This
money?
memo has nothing.
If critical race theory is taught in more schools, does your son-in-law make more money? Yes or no?
This memorandum has nothing to do with critical race
Will
theory
you answer
or
if you
any
sought an
other
ethics
kind
opinion?
of curriculum.
Will you
It has-
answer if you sought an ethics
I am answering the best I can.
Yes or no? Did you seek an ethics opinion?
This memorandum has
Did
nothing.
you seek an ethics opinion?
This memorandum has nothing to do with.
General, are you
critical race
refusing to answer if you sought an ethics
theory. I am
opinion?
telling you that there's no possible.
So you're saying no. Just answer it directly. You know how to answer a question directly. Did you seek an ethics opinion?
I'm telling you that if I thought there was any reason to believe there was a conflict of interest, I would do that. But I cannot.
Why do you
imagine
refuse to answer
a
the question?
conflict
Why
of
won't you
interest.
just say no?
I'm sorry.
You're not going to answer the question?
I'm sorry. Ask the question again.
Did you seek an ethics opinion?
I'm saying again, I would seek an ethics opinion in.
So no is the answer,
where I
correct?
thought there was a conflict.
Senator, your time is up.
Let the record reflect the Attorney General refuses to answer whether he sought an ethics opinion, and apparently ethics are not a terribly high priority in the Biden Justice Department.
I don't think that's a fair reflection of what I said.
Then answer the question.
Senator, you've gone way beyond any other senator's time. I think you ought to be at least respectful of other senators at this point.
Mr. Chairman, do you know the answer whether he sought an ethics opinion?
I think you have exchanged that so many times, we know where we stand.